Hey everyone, it's Eddie Campos. I'm here at Maddie and Bella's on St. Clair Street in downtown Toledo. We're here to interview Ken Wood with the Martin+Wood Appraisal Group. We've got 4 great episodes for you. Let's go inside and get started. Hey everyone, Eddie Campos here with Remax Preferred Associates. This is episode 33 with Coffee with Eddie. Today we're with Ken Wood at Maddie and Bella's. Ken is with the Martin+Wood Appraisal Group. And we're going to talk about appraisals today, but we're going to start with a couple of basic questions, just in case you're not familiar with how an appraisal works in a residential real estate transaction. Ken, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Ed.
I wanted to ask you, so in an appraisal, who orders the appraisal and who pays for the appraisal?
Typically, if it's a purchase, the bank or the bank's management company will order the appraisal from a panel of approved appraisers, and they typically will select the appraiser based on a rotation.
Okay.
And some banks will have a very large pool of approved appraisers. Some banks will have maybe 2 or 3 appraisers. And as far as paying for the appraisal, there's a little bit of a misconception in that the banks pay the appraiser because the banks are our client, not the buyer or the applicant. Even though the buyer or the applicant ultimately pays the bank for the appraisal, the bank is our client. They want to order the appraisal to make sure that the sale price meets their expectations in terms of their collateral position.
So it sounds like, from what you said, there's a little bit of an arm's length distance between the bank and the appraisal. Is there the appraiser? Is there a certain reason for that?
There is. It actually started with the downturn of the real estate market after the economy was having some problems. Dodd-Frank implemented a law, and part of that law was where a commissioned loan officer or anybody in loan production was no longer allowed to order an appraisal.
Okay.
So banks were required to set up an internal firewall, and some banks did that successfully. Other banks decided to punt and farm the work out to an appraisal management company.
Almost acting as like a broker.
That is correct. So an appraisal management company, they will select the appraiser from their panel. They will manage the whole process. They will also review the appraisal. And there's some really good appraisal management companies, and then there's some others that are not so good. And from my perspective, the ones that don't do a good job are the ones that don't effectively communicate because you have that additional layer.
Sure.
And then also they sometimes pick maybe who's not the best appraiser, but who's the least expensive.
Sure, which doesn't always necessarily mean that they're getting the best appraiser then.
Correct, and they may not have the geographic competency or the experience.
Sure. So that's in regards to a transaction. So from a listing perspective, can a seller get an appraisal?
Yes. Sometimes I recommend that a seller gets an appraisal, and I say sometimes because not always. If they're working with a good realtor like yourself who has an experience in a certain neighborhood, most of the realtors can determine accurately what that list price and ultimately what the sale price should be. If it's a unique property or it's a high-end property, or let's say that a seller has unrealistic expectations of what the value is, or they have no clue, then it's definitely a good idea for the seller to order an appraisal.
Well, it's funny that you said a unique property, because I remember I kind of started using an appraiser as part of my listing presentation when I had a home that I listed in Old West End, built in 1921, that was 6,000 square feet with 5 bedrooms and 7 fireplaces on 3 lots. It was incredibly unique, and in my case, the numbers I was predicting were not very attractive during the recession, obviously, because values were dropping like a rock. And I suggested that we get an appraisal, and that helped also build some confidence between the seller and myself, because obviously when you see a number that's coming back substantially lower than you're expecting, it could make you think that, is this accurate? So from a listing perspective, I think they're a great tool.
Correct. And it can also be not only a negotiating tool, but it allows more confidence in the transaction. And it's the same thing with a potential buyer, especially if a buyer is maybe not familiar with the real estate market or they're a cash buyer, and as part of their due diligence, they want to make sure that they're not overpaying.
Right, good point. Well, we're here at Maddie and Bella's. We're on St. Clair Street. I'm speaking with Ken Wood of Martin+Wood Appraisal Group. This is episode 33. We'll see you next week.